At my cousin's wedding, she said during her speech, "My cousin is a single mom. Nobody ever wanted her." The whole room laughed. Then my dad added, "She's like reheated leftovers. No one wants that." That's when the groom stood up, grabbed the mic, and turned my world upside down. I never wanted to attend Claire's wedding in the first place. I had spent years distancing myself from family gatherings where I knew I'd be the subject of whispered comments and barely concealed disapproval. But my son Tyler had convinced me to go. "Mom, she's still family," he said with the innocent wisdom of his 16 years. "Besides, aren't you tired of hiding from them?" I remember smoothing down my navy blue dress in the church parking lot, taking deep breaths to calm my racing heart. I had spent extra on a salon appointment, desperate not to give my relatives anything to criticize. The ceremony had gone well enough. I kept to myself, smiled when appropriate, and focused on making it through the day without incident. The reception was held at the Westbrook Country Club. All crystal chandeliers and white roses, exactly what Claire had always dreamed of. I sat at the back table with distant relatives and a couple of Claire's colleagues who seemed confused about why I was seated with them instead of at the family table. When the speeches started, I felt myself relax slightly. Just a few more hours, and I could leave with my dignity intact. I'd done it. I'd shown up as the bigger person. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. That's when Claire tapped her champagne glass, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she stood. "I want to thank everyone for coming today," she began, her voice carrying across the room. "Family means everything to me." I took a sip of my water, watching as she thanked her parents, her new in-laws, various friends. Then her eyes found mine, and "I'd like to acknowledge my cousin Rebecca, who managed to make it today." The way she said it made it sound like I'd done something wrong by attending. "My cousin is a single mom. Nobody ever wanted her." The laughter started immediately, rippling through the room. I froze, my glass halfway to my lips, feeling every eye turn toward me. My cheeks burned as I set my glass down with shaking hands. Before I could even process what was happening, my father's voice boomed from the head table. "She's like reheated leftovers. No one wants that." More laughter, louder this time. I stared at my hands, willing myself not to cry, not to run, not to give. Then the satisfaction of seeing how deeply they'd wounded me. 18 years of raising Tyler alone, working 2 jobs while putting myself through nursing school, building a life despite their predictions of failure, all reduced to a cruel joke at my expense. That's when something unexpected happened. Nathan, Claire's new husband, stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor as he pushed it back. The room quieted as he reached for the microphone, his expression unreadable. Claire tugged at his sleeve, but he gently pulled away. "I'd like to say something," he said, his voice steady and clear in the sudden silence. "What I just heard isn't funny. It's cruel." My head snapped up, certain I'd misheard him. Claire's perfect husband was defending me? "Rebecca isn't leftovers," he continued, looking directly at me. "She's a woman who, from what I understand, has raised an incredible son on her own while building a career in nursing. That doesn't make her unwanted. That makes her remarkable." The room had gone completely still. I could see Claire's face flushing with anger, my father's jaw tightening in that familiar way that always preceded an explosion. "I was raised by a single mother," Nathan said, his voice softening slightly. "She worked herself to exhaustion to give me opportunities. She faced judgment every day from people who should have supported her. So I know what it looks like when someone chooses to be strong despite having every reason to break." He turned to Claire, then to my father. "If that's your definition of leftovers, then perhaps your values need reconsidering." With that, he set the microphone down and walked straight toward my table. Behind him, I could see Claire standing frozen, her mouth opening and closing without sound. My father's face had turned a dangerous shade of red. Nathan stopped in front of me, extending his hand. "Would you like to step outside for some air?" I stared at his outstretched hand, too stunned to move. Every eye in the room was on us, the weight of 2 decades of family judgment pressed down on me. But beneath that familiar heaviness, I felt something new stirring, a flicker of long-extinguished dignity reigniting. I placed my hand in his, stood up, and walked with him toward the door. The whispers followed us, but for once, I didn't care what they were saying. Outside, the summer evening was warm, the sky painted in deepening shades of orange and pink. I inhaled deeply, trying to steady myself. "I'm sorry about that," Nathan said, loosening his tie. I know it wasn't my place to intervene, but I couldn't sit there and listen to that. "Why?" I asked, the question barely audible. "You don't even know me." He leaned against the stone balustrade, looking out over the manicured gardens. "My mother was 19 when she had me. My father left before I was born. I watched her face the same kind of comments for years." I nodded, understanding. "Thank you," I said simply. Before he could respond, the door behind us burst open. Claire stormed out, her white gown billowing around her, face contorted with rage. "What the hell was that?" she demanded, glaring at Nathan. "You humiliated me at my own wedding." My father appeared behind her, followed by my mother, whose eyes were darting nervously between all of us. "You need to apologize," my father said to Nathan, his voice low and threatening. "Right now." Nathan straightened, meeting my father's gaze, without flinching. "I won't apologize for standing up against cruelty." Claire turned to me, her perfectly applied makeup now streaked with angry tears. "This is all your fault. You've always been jealous of me, and now you've turned my husband against me on my wedding day." The accusation was so absurd that a small, unexpected laugh escaped me. For 20 years, I'd swallowed their insults, made excuses for their behavior, told myself that family was family, no matter how toxic. I'd believed that staying quiet and taking their abuse was somehow noble. But standing there, watching Claire's tantrum and my father's intimidation tactics fail against Nathan's simple decency, something inside me finally broke free. "No, Claire," I said, my voice steady for the first time in years when confronting my family. "This isn't my fault. I came here today hoping that maybe, just maybe, you could be happy for one day without putting me down. I was wrong." I turned to my father. "And you're my father. You're supposed to protect me, not join in when others hurt me." His eyes widened in shock. I'd never spoken to him this way. "How dare you speak to me like that?" he started, but I cut him off. "I've earned the right. After everything I've endured from this family, I've more than earned it." I looked at each of their faces, Claire's indignant rage, my father's angry disbelief, my mother's fearful confusion, and felt a strange calm settle over me. I'd spent so many years fearing their disapproval, but now I could see clearly their opinions of me had never been about who I actually was. They had always been about their own insecurities, their own narrow definitions of success and worth. "I'm leaving now," I said quietly. "Tyler's waiting for me at home," Claire scoffed, running away as usual. I shook my head. "No, Claire, for the first time, I'm not running from anything. I'm walking away from what doesn't deserve to be in my life." As I turned to leave, Nathan caught my eye. The small nod he gave me held more respect than I'd received from my family in 20 years. I walked to my car alone, the evening air cool against my skin. My hands were steady as I unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat. The strange thing was, I didn't feel the familiar ache of rejection that had followed me out of every family gathering for the past 2 decades. Instead, I felt something unfamiliar, something that took me a moment to identify. It was relief. As I pulled out of the parking lot, leaving behind the muffled sounds of a celebration that had revealed far more truth than anyone had intended, I realized that sometimes the greatest gift isn't being accepted by others. It's finally accepting yourself. The drive home from Claire's wedding was quiet. Streetlights flashed across my face as I replayed the night's events in my mind. I kept seeing Nathan standing up, the shock on Claire's face, the fury in my father's eyes. Part of me still couldn't believe it had happened. When I pulled into our small driveway, the porch light was on. Tyler was waiting up for me, despite my insistence that he didn't need to. At 16, he was already taller than me, with the same dark hair and eyes that reminded me so much of his father. "You're back early," he said, looking up from his phone as I walked in. His expression changed immediately when he saw my face. "What happened?" I set my purse down and kicked off my heels. "The usual," I said, trying to sound casual. "Your grandfather and Claire being themselves." Tyler frowned. What did they say this time? I hesitated, never wanting to burden him with the family's cruelty, but he was old enough now, and keeping him in the dark wasn't protecting him anymore. Claire called me unwanted during her speech. Dad compared me to leftovers. Tyler's face hardened, his hands curling into fists. "That's messed up." It is, I agreed, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. But something unexpected happened. Claire's husband actually defended me. As I told Tyler about Nathan's intervention, I found myself transported back to where it all began, to the day that forever changed my standing in the family. I was 19, a sophomore in college with dreams of becoming a journalist. James and I had been dating for nearly 2 years. He was charming, ambitious, from a good family, as my father kept reminding me. Everything was going according to plan until the day I stared down at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. When I told James, his face went pale. "This isn't part of the plan, Rebecca," he said. "We're too young. I can't do this." Within a week, he'd transferred to another university. His parents called mine, blaming me entirely. "Your daughter trapped our son," they said, as if I'd somehow planned this. I still remember sitting at our dining room table, my parents across from me, their disappointment palpable. "You've ruined your life," my father said, his voice cold. "And you've embarrassed this family." My mother just cried, not looking at me. "I'm keeping the baby," I told them. "I can finish school part-time." My father laughed, a harsh sound that still echoes in my memory. "With what money? You think we'll pay for you to ruin your life? To become another statistic?" I looked to my mother for support, but she just stared at her hands. Claire, 3 years younger than me, watched from the doorway, eyes wide. She had always followed me around, wanting to be just like her older cousin. But after that day, something shifted. She began to distance herself, treating me with the same disdain as the rest of the family, as if my pregnancy were contagious. I moved out that week, took a job waitressing, and enrolled in community college classes. 9 months later, I gave birth to Tyler, alone except for a kind nurse who held my hand through the delivery. My parents came to the hospital the next day. My mother held Tyler briefly, a flicker of softness crossing her face before my father spoke. "You could have given him up for adoption," he said. "Given him a real family." "I am his real family," I replied, a fierce protectiveness surging through me. They left shortly after, and the pattern was set. Over the years, every achievement of mine was minimized, every struggle magnified as proof of my poor choices. Meanwhile, Claire became the family golden child. Perfect grades, perfect boyfriend, perfect life trajectory. I worked double shifts at the diner, then as a receptionist at a medical clinic where a kind doctor encouraged me to consider nursing. "You're good with people," she said, "and nursing is stable. You could support yourself and your son." So I went back to school again, studying at night after Tyler was asleep, living on coffee and determination. When I graduated from nursing school, Tyler was 8 years old. He sat in the audience, cheering louder than anyone when they called my name. My parents attended the graduation, but their congratulations felt hollow. "At least you've made something of yourself," my father said, as if surprised I hadn't ended up in a ditch. Over the years, I kept a careful distance, attending only the most essential family gatherings, limiting our exposure to their toxicity. I dated occasionally, but nothing serious. My focus was always Tyler and building our life. "Mom?" Tyler's voice pulled me back to the present. "Are you okay?" I realized I'd been quiet for too long, lost in memories. "I'm fine, honey. Just thinking." "I'm sorry they're so mean to you," he said, his young face serious. "You don't deserve it." I reached out and squeezed his hand. "Thank you for saying that. Do you ever wish things had been different?" he asked. "Do you regret having me?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "Never," I said firmly. "Not for 1 second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Tyler. Don't ever doubt that." He nodded, but I could see the weight of the family's judgment had reached him too. "How could it not? What happens now?" he asked. "Now," I said, surprising myself with my certainty, "things change. I've spent too many years hoping they'd see me differently, accept me, but tonight made me realize they never will, and that's their loss." My phone buzzed with a text. "Unknown number. This is Nathan. Got your number from the wedding planner. Just checking if you're okay. What happened tonight wasn't right." I stared at the message, unsure how to respond or what it meant. After all these years of weathering the storm alone, someone had finally seen the truth and spoken up. It was a small thing, perhaps, but it felt monumental. "Who is it?" Tyler asked. "Someone unexpected," I replied, a small smile forming. "Someone who stood up when it counted." I didn't respond to Nathan's text that night. What could I say? Thanks for defending the family disappointment? I turned off my phone and tried to sleep, But my mind kept replaying the moment he stood up for me. No one had ever done that. Before Monday morning came with a flurry of messages from relatives. My Aunt Susan called, ostensibly concerned. "Everyone's talking about what happened. Claire is devastated." My cousin Mark texted, "Way to ruin the wedding." Even my mother left a voicemail asking me to call Claire and apologize. Apologize. For what? For being humiliated? For having someone finally stand up against years of cruelty? I deleted the messages and headed to work at the hospital. Focusing on my patients was the escape I needed. Their problems were real, urgent, and had nothing to do with petty family dramas. I was checking a patient's IV when my phone buzzed again. "Nathan, having coffee at Carson's Cafe at 1 p.m. if you want to talk. No pressure." Carson's was just across from the hospital. I stared at the message, conflicted. Part of me wanted to keep my distance. Getting involved with Claire's husband, even just for coffee, seemed like asking for trouble. But another part, a stronger part, wanted answers. Why had he done it? What was he thinking now? At 1:15, I pushed. Through the cafe door, still in my scrubs. Nathan was in the corner booth, 2 cups of coffee in front of him. He stood when he saw me. "You came," he said, looking genuinely pleased. "I wasn't sure you would." I slid into the booth. "I wasn't sure I would either." He pushed one of the coffees toward me. "I guessed you might take it black. Nurses usually do." I smiled despite myself. Good guess. For a moment, we sat in awkward silence. I studied him properly for the first time. Sandy brown hair, kind eyes, a face that looked like it smiled easily. Not at all what I'd expected for Claire, who typically went for flashier types. "How are you holding up?" he asked finally. I shrugged. I've had worse family gatherings. Though this one might set a record for text messages telling me what a terrible person I am, his expression darkened. "That's not right. It's just how they are," I said, surprised by my own casualness. "Been that way since I got pregnant with Tyler, your son." I nodded, pulling out my phone to show him a picture. "He's 16 now, honor roll student, wants to study engineering." Nathan smiled at the photo. "He has your eyes." Another silence fell, more comfortable this time. I took a sip of coffee, then asked the question that had been burning in my mind. "Why did you do it? Stand up for me at the wedding? You don't even know me." He set his cup down carefully. "My mom had me when she was 20. My dad left, said he wasn't ready for a kid. Her family treated her like she'd committed some terrible crime." His eyes met mine. "I grew up watching people look down on her, make comments, treat her like she was less than. It wasn't right then, and it's not right now." "What about Claire?" I asked. "She must be furious with you." A wry smile crossed his face. "That's putting it mildly. She stayed at her parents' house last night, says I embarrassed her in front of everyone." "You did," I pointed out. "Maybe," he conceded, "but she embarrassed herself with what she said. I just didn't let it stand." I studied him, trying to reconcile this man with the image of who I thought Claire would marry. "I don't get it. How did you end up with Claire? She's always been judgmental," he supplied. "She wasn't like that when we met, or at least I didn't see it." He ran a hand through his hair. "We met at a charity event 2 years ago. She was charming, ambitious. But lately, I've been seeing another side of her, the wedding speech." He shook his head. "That wasn't the woman I thought I married." I felt a pang of sympathy for him. "People show you who they are eventually. With Claire, it just took longer." He looked at me curiously. "You don't seem bitter, after all they've put you through." "Oh, I was," I admitted. "For years. But bitterness is exhausting. At some point, I realized it was hurting me more than them." I glanced at my watch. I should get back to work. As I stood, he asked, "Can I call you sometime, just to talk?" I hesitated. "I'm not sure that's a good idea. You're still Claire's husband. I'm also a person who thinks you got a raw deal," he said simply. "And sometimes it helps to have someone to talk to who understands." I considered this. "As friends?" He nodded. "Just friends." I scribbled my number on a napkin, though I knew he already had it. "Friends, then." Back at the hospital, my mind kept returning to our conversation. It felt strange to have someone from Claire's world see things from my perspective. Strange, but not unwelcome. That evening, as Tyler and I were eating dinner, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find my mother standing there, looking uncomfortable. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside, surprised. My mother rarely visited without my father. She perched on the edge of our couch, declining my offer of tea. Your father is very upset about what happened at the wedding. I imagine he is, I said, keeping my voice neutral. He thinks you should apologize to Claire. I laughed incredulously. For what? I didn't do anything. She twisted her hands in her lap. You know how these things go, Rebecca. It's easier if you just smooth things over. Easier for who? I asked. For Dad? For Claire? It's never been easier for me, Mom. I've been smoothing things over for 17 years. Rebecca, no, I interrupted. I'm done being the family punching bag. If Dad or Claire want to talk to me, they can start with an apology. My mother looked shocked. This isn't like you. Maybe it should be, I replied. Maybe it's time I stood up for myself, the way Nathan stood up for me. At the mention of Nathan, her expression changed. That's what I really came to talk about. Claire says you've been talking to Nathan. My coffee with Nathan had only been hours ago. Of course, Claire already knew. We had coffee, as friends. You need to stay away from him, she said, her voice unusually firm. He's Claire's husband. He's also the only person in this family who's shown me basic human decency in years, I shot back. Including you, Mom. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's not fair, isn't it? Where were you all those times Dad belittled me? When Claire made her little comments, you never said a word. She stood up, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. I should go. As she reached the door, she turned back. Just think about what I said, Rebecca. Don't make things worse. After she left, I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. Tyler emerged from his room where he'd been discreetly hiding during the conversation. Grandma seemed upset, he observed, sitting beside me. She thinks I should apologize to make peace, I explained. Tyler was quiet for a moment. Are you going to? I looked at my son, this wonderful person who had grown up watching me swallow my pride time and again for the sake of family harmony. No, I said firmly. Not this time. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Thanks for meeting today. It helped. Despite everything, I smiled. A week after the wedding, the family was still in turmoil. My phone had finally stopped buzzing with accusatory messages, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. At work, I maintained my routine, grateful for the normalcy of hospital shifts and patient care. Nathan and I texted occasionally. Nothing inappropriate, just checking in. He'd gone back home, he said, but things with Claire were tense. I tried not to get involved, reminding myself it wasn't my business. Saturday morning, I was folding laundry when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find my cousin Diane standing on my porch. Unlike Claire, Diane had always been kind to me, though we weren't particularly close. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside, puzzled by her unexpected visit. She settled at my kitchen table while I made coffee. I wanted to check on you, she said. What Claire and Uncle Robert did at the wedding was awful. I nearly dropped the mug I was holding. You think so? Of course, she said, looking surprised. Everyone was shocked. Well, everyone with a conscience. I set the coffee in front of her, processing this revelation. I thought the whole family was against me. Diane shook her head. Not all of us. Some of us have watched how they've treated you for years and hated it. We just never said anything. Why not? I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. She looked down, ashamed. It was easier not to. I'm not proud of that, I nodded, understanding all too well the family dynamics at play. What's changed now? Nathan, she said simply. When he stood up, it was like permission for the rest of us to finally acknowledge what we've all seen. You didn't deserve any of it, Rebecca. Not then, not now. Tears stung my eyes. After years of feeling isolated within my own family, hearing these words was overwhelming. Thank you for saying that. There's something else, Diane said, her expression turning serious. Claire is telling everyone you're trying to steal Nathan away. I nearly choked on my coffee. What? She says you've been meeting him behind her back trying to break up their marriage. That's ridiculous, I sputtered. We had coffee once. In public, across from the hospital where I work. We've texted a few times, that's all. Diane nodded. I figured as much. But Claire is on the warpath. Uncle Robert is backing her up, of course. I felt a familiar knot of anxiety forming. Of course he is. There's going to be a family dinner next Sunday at Aunt Margaret's, she continued. Everyone's expected to attend, I think. I think they're planning some kind of intervention. An intervention? I repeated incredulously. For what? To get you to stop causing trouble, she said, making air quotes. That's how Uncle Robert put it. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. 17 years of taking their abuse, and I'm the one causing trouble? Will you come? Diane asked. I know. It sounds awful, but maybe it's time to clear the air. And you won't be alone this time. My husband and I will support you. So will Uncle James and Aunt Patricia. I was stunned. Uncle James was my father's brother, and they'd always been close. Really? Really, she confirmed. Like I said, things are changing. After Diane left, I sat for a long time thinking. Part of me wanted to skip the dinner, to continue my new policy of not subjecting myself to their judgment. But another part, a stronger part, was tired of running. I texted Nathan. Apparently we're having an affair. His response came quickly. So Claire's been telling me, repeatedly. There's a family dinner next Sunday. They're planning an intervention. A pause then. Are you going? I think so. Time to stop hiding. Good for you. Let me know how it goes. The week passed quickly. Tyler was initially against me attending the dinner. They're just going to be mean to you again, Mom. But I explained that I needed to stand my ground. Sometimes, I told him, the only way past something is through it. Sunday arrived cool and clear. I dressed carefully in a simple blue dress, applied light makeup, and drove to Aunt Margaret's house. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my heart raced. Cars lined the driveway when I arrived. I recognized my father's sedan, Claire's sports, car, and several others. For a moment, I sat in my car, gathering courage. Then I walked to the door and rang the bell. Aunt Margaret answered, her expression a mix of concern and relief. Rebecca, you came. Good. Everyone's in the living room. I followed her inside, bracing myself. The living room fell silent as I entered. My father sat in an armchair, back rigid. Claire perched on the sofa, eyes red as if she'd been crying. My mother stood by the window, looking uncomfortable. Various other relatives were scattered around the room, their expressions ranging from sympathetic to judgmental. Rebecca, my father said, his voice clipped. Sit down. I remained standing. I prefer to stand, thank you. His jaw tightened. Always. Difficult. Actually, I replied calmly, I'm being quite reasonable considering I've been invited to my own public shaming. Claire made a choked sound. You're the one who should be ashamed. Trying to steal my husband. I turned to her, keeping my voice level. I haven't tried to steal anyone, Claire. Nathan and I had coffee once as friends. We've texted a few times. That's all? Liar! She spat. He defends you at our wedding, and suddenly he's questioning our entire marriage. That caught me off guard. I looked around the room, noting the uncomfortable shifting of several relatives. If your marriage is in trouble, I said carefully, that has nothing to do with me. My father stood up abruptly. This is exactly the kind of disrespect we're talking about. You've always been selfish, Rebecca. Always making everything about you. I felt a familiar wave of shame threatening to rise, the old instinct to apologize, to make peace. But then I remembered Nathan's words at the wedding, remembered Tyler watching me stand up for myself. No, I said firmly. I won't accept that anymore. For 17 years, I've been the family scapegoat. I've been mocked, belittled, and excluded. And when someone finally pointed out how wrong that was, you didn't reflect on your behavior. You blamed me again. The room was deadly quiet. Rebecca, my mother began, her voice pleading, we just want peace, I finished for her. You want peace, but not justice, not respect, just silence from me while the rest of you continue as you always have. To my surprise, Uncle James stood up from his chair in the corner. She's right, he said, looking directly at my father. We've all watched how you've treated her, Robert. It wasn't right then, and it's not right now. My father's face flushed with anger. Stay out of this, James. No, Uncle James replied. I've stayed out of it for too long. We all have. Aunt Patricia nodded, moving to stand beside her husband. Rebecca deserved better from all of us. One by one, others stood. Diane and her husband, Cousin Mark's wife, even elderly Aunt Ruth. Not everyone, but enough to make it clear. The family was divided. Claire looked around in disbelief. So you're all taking her side now? After everything? There shouldn't be sides, Diane said quietly. We're family. My father glared at me, his face contorted with a rage I recognized from childhood. This is what you wanted, isn't it? To turn everyone against us. I shook my head, suddenly exhausted by it all. No, Dad, I just wanted to be treated with basic decency. That's all I've ever wanted. I left Aunt Margaret's house that night with my head held high, though my hands shook as I drove home. Something fundamental had shifted. For the first time, I wasn't alone against my father and Claire. Others had finally spoken up. The family's united front had cracked. Tyler was waiting up when I got home, despite my insistence that he didn't need to. "How did it go?" he asked, looking up from his laptop. I sank onto the couch beside him. "Honestly, better than I expected. Some people actually defended me." His eyebrows shot up. "Seriously? Who?" As I recounted the evening, his expression shifted from skepticism to cautious hope. "So Grandpa and Claire are finally getting called out?" "It seems that way," I said, still processing it myself. "It won't change overnight, but it's something." The next morning, I woke to a text from Nathan. "How did it go?" I replied. "Mixed. Some family members actually stood up for me. Claire accused me of trying to steal you away. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, Claire and I are separating. Her choice, not mine. Thought you should know before she blames you for that too." I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. I settled on, "I'm sorry it's come to that." "Don't be," he wrote back. "It's been coming for a while. The wedding just made things clearer." I put my phone down, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Nathan's marriage wasn't my business, and getting involved would only confirm Claire's accusations. At work, I threw myself into my duties, grateful for the distraction. Around midday, I was checking a patient's vitals when Nurse Martinez poked her head in. "Rebecca, there's someone asking for you at the front desk. Says it's urgent." I finished my task, then headed to the reception area, expecting perhaps Diane or another relative with more family drama. Instead, I found my father. He stood rigidly by the desk, looking out of place in his business suit among the patients and medical staff. When he saw me, his expression hardened. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice professional. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," he replied stiffly. "In private." I glanced at my watch. "I have a break in 20 minutes. We can talk in the cafeteria." He looked like he wanted to demand immediate attention, but nodded curtly. 20 tense minutes later, we sat across from each other at a corner table in the hospital cafeteria. I sipped my coffee, waiting for him to speak. "You've created quite a situation," he finally said. "I didn't create anything," I replied evenly. "I just stopped accepting mistreatment." He scoffed. "Mistreatment, always so dramatic." "Was it dramatic when you compared me to leftovers at Claire's wedding?" I asked. "Or when Claire called me unwanted in front of everyone? Would you accept anyone speaking to you that way?" He shifted uncomfortably. "That was unfortunate." "Unfortunate," I repeated. "That's all you have to say?" "What do you want from me, Rebecca?" he demanded, his voice rising slightly. "An apology? Fine. I'm sorry if your feelings were hurt." I shook my head. "That's not an apology, Dad. That's... You trying to make this my fault again?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Claire and Nathan are separating. Your mother can barely look me in the eye. Half the family isn't speaking to the other half." "And you think that's because of me?" I asked incredulously. "Not because of how you and Claire behaved? Not because of how you've treated me for 17 years? There it is again," he said bitterly. "Poor Rebecca, always the victim." I took a deep breath, struggling to maintain my composure. "I'm not a victim, Dad. Not anymore. That's what you don't understand. For years, I accepted being the family scapegoat because I thought I had to. Because I thought it was my fault for getting pregnant young." His jaw tightened at the mention of my pregnancy. "But I see clearly now," I continued. "The problem was never me. It was you. Your rigid expectations, your inability to forgive, your need to control everything and everyone. You ungrateful." He started, then cut himself off as a nurse walked by. "Ungrateful," I echoed. "For what exactly? What have you given me that I should be grateful for? You cut me off when I needed you most. You've belittled me at every opportunity. You've taught the entire family to treat me as less than." He stared at me, seeming genuinely baffled by my resistance. I put a roof over your head for 18 years. I paid for your education until you decided to throw it away. I didn't throw anything away, I said firmly. I changed course when my circumstances changed. And I've built a good life despite your predictions of failure. I'm a registered nurse. I own my home. I've raised an amazing son, all without your help. And you think that gives you the right to tear this family apart? I shook my head, suddenly tired of the conversation. The family was already broken, Dad. It broke the day you decided your pride was more important than your daughter. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This conversation is pointless. You clearly have no intention of fixing what you've done. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Dad. He paused, not looking back. I don't hate you, I said quietly. I've never hated you. I just wanted you to love me unconditionally, the way I love Tyler. His shoulders stiffened, but he walked away without responding. I sat there for a long time after he left, feeling strangely hollow. I had said everything I'd wanted to say for years, and yet there was no satisfaction in it. My father hadn't heard me. He probably never would. When I returned to the nurse's station, Martinez took one look at my face and pulled me aside. You okay? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Family stuff? How'd you guess? I asked Riley. She squeezed my arm. That look you've got, I know it well. For what it's worth, it gets easier. Does it? Once you stop expecting them to be different than they are? Yeah, it does. Her words stayed with me through the rest of my shift. Maybe that had been my mistake all these years, expecting my father to change, to suddenly become the supportive parent I needed. Perhaps acceptance wasn't about forgiving their behavior, but about acknowledging the reality of who they were and adjusting my expectations accordingly. That evening, I called Tyler from the hospital parking lot. I'm picking up pizza on the way home. Any requests? The usual, he replied. Then, Mom, are you okay? You sound tired. I had a visit from Grandpa today. A pause. What did he want? To blame me for tearing the family apart? I said, trying to keep my voice light. The usual. What did you say? I smiled despite myself. I told him the truth. For once. Good, Tyler said firmly. It's about time. 6 months passed. The family remained fractured after the confrontation at Aunt Margaret's house. My father and Claire maintained their position that I had somehow orchestrated everything to cause trouble. Others, like Uncle James and Diane, stayed in regular contact, forming an unexpected support system. Nathan and Claire's separation became a divorce. I kept my distance, though he occasionally texted to check in. Tyler turned 17, applying to colleges with an eye toward engineering programs. Watching him plan his future, confident, unburdened by the family legacy of shame that had colored my own youth, filled me with quiet pride. Mom, what about this one? He asked one evening, turning his laptop toward me. It's got a great engineering program, and it's only 2 hours away. I looked at the screen, noting the university's impressive facilities. Looks promising. Should we plan a campus visit? He nodded, then hesitated. I was thinking, maybe we could invite Uncle James and Aunt Patricia? Uncle James mentioned he went there. I smiled, touched by how easily Tyler had embraced these newly strengthened family connections. That's a great idea. Spring was in bloom when Diane called, her voice hesitant. There's going to be a family gathering for Aunt Ruth's 80th birthday next month. She's specifically asked for you to be there. Aunt Ruth, my father's aunt, had been among those who stood up for me at the intervention dinner. Still, the thought of another family event made my stomach tighten. I don't know, Diane. It won't be like before, she assured me. Dad's organizing it, not Uncle Robert, and Aunt Ruth really wants you there. I sighed. All right, Tyler and I will come. The birthday celebration was held at Uncle James's spacious home. As Tyler and I approached, I felt the familiar knot of anxiety form in my chest. We don't have to stay long, Tyler said, sensing my tension. I squeezed his hand. It'll be fine. And if it's not, we'll leave. Aunt Ruth spotted us immediately. Rebecca, you came! I bent to hug her fragile frame. Happy birthday, Aunt Ruth. At 80, dear, I look alive, which is wonderful enough, she quipped, patting my cheek. I looked around, noting who was present and who wasn't. My father and mother were notably absent, as was Claire. When I caught Diane's eye, she gave me a small shrug and mouthed, they declined. Strangely, their absence didn't hurt as I expected. Instead, I felt a sense of lightness, free from the weight of their judgment. The afternoon passed pleasantly, Tyler engaged in animated conversation with Uncle James about engineering programs. I caught up with cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, surprised by how genuinely interested they seemed in my life. As the sun began to set, Aunt Ruth asked for everyone's attention. "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate an old woman's birthday," she began, her voice thin but clear. "At my age, every gathering feels precious." She paused, her gaze finding me. "I especially want to thank those who might have had reason to stay away but chose to come anyway. Family should be a source of strength, not pain. Some of us forgot that for a while." A murmur of agreement rippled through the gathering. I felt a lump form in my throat. After her speech, as guests began to depart, Aunt Ruth beckoned me over. "Sit with me a moment," she said. I settled next to her, watching as Tyler helped clear dishes in the distance. "Your boy is a credit to you," she observed. "You've done well, Rebecca." "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." She took my hand in her papery one. "I want you to know something. I was wrong to stay silent all those years. We all were. What your father and Claire did?" She shook her head. "It wasn't right." "It's okay, Aunt Ruth," I began, but she cut me off. "No, it's not okay. But what I want you to understand is that their behavior was never about you. It was about them, their insecurities, their rigid ideas about how life should be." She squeezed my hand. "You were just convenient to blame when life didn't go according to their plan." I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. "I'm starting to understand that." "Good," she said firmly, "because you deserve peace, dear. And sometimes peace means accepting that some people will never give you what you need." As we drove home that evening, I reflected on Aunt Ruth's words. For so long, I had measured my worth by my family's approval, or lack thereof. I had internalized their judgment, carrying it like a weight around my neck, but something had changed. The weight had lifted, not because they had finally accepted me, but because I had finally accepted myself. 2 weeks later, I was gardening when Nathan's car pulled up. He approached the gate. "Is this a bad time?" I wiped my hands on my jeans. "Not at all. Come in." He followed me to the patio where I poured us both iced tea. "The divorce is final," he said after taking a sip. "I thought you should hear it from me instead of through family gossip." "I'm sorry it ended that way," I said, meaning it. He shrugged. "I'm not anymore. It needed to happen." He set his glass down. "Claire and I were wrong for each other. From the start. I just didn't see it until the wedding," I finished for him. He nodded. "Seeing how she treated you, how your father treated you, it was like a curtain being pulled back. I couldn't unsee it." "How are you doing?" he asked. "Finally, with everything?" I considered the question. "Better than I expected. I've reconnected with parts of the family I'd written off. I've set boundaries with others, and I've stopped waiting for my father and Claire to change. That's the hardest part, isn't it?" he observed, letting go of the hope that they'll suddenly become who you need them to be. "It is," I agreed, "but it's also freeing." As Nathan left, he paused at the gate. "I'd like to keep being friends if that's okay with you. No pressure, no expectations." I smiled. "I'd like that too." That night, as I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked different somehow, not physically, but something in my eyes had changed. The shadow of hurt and insecurity had lifted, replaced by a quiet confidence. I thought about the journey of the past 6 months, from the humiliation at Claire's wedding to this moment of peace. Nathan's defense had been the catalyst, but the real change had come from within, from finally standing in my truth and refusing to accept less than I deserved. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler, who was at a friend's house. "Love you, Mom. See you tomorrow." I smiled, typing back, "Love you too. Family." The word had meant pain and rejection for so long. But now, looking at Tyler's text, thinking of Uncle James, Aunt Patricia, Diane, and Aunt Ruth, I realized something important. Family wasn't just about blood. It was about who showed up, who stood by you, who saw your worth without conditions. And by that definition, I had a family after all.